Welcome to Hannity. It's time for the world to wake up. In just the past 4 months, we have seen a sharp spike in the number of radical Islamic terror attacks around the world, including right here on American soil. Watch this.
Sounds like he's running around out here.
Okay.
And that's a gunshot.
Tonight, terror in the heartland. The FBI is investigating a brutal beheading in Moore, Oklahoma, after the suspect's co-workers revealed that he had been trying to convert them to Islam.
He did kill Colleen and did sever her head.
Ottawa, Canada now, where there has been a shooting at Parliament Hill, which is now in complete lockdown. The suspect is still on the loose. This is an active shooting situation.
A man with apparent sympathies toward anti-American rhetoric is dead tonight after attacking a group of New York City police officers with a hatchet.
Preliminary evaluation is that this was a terrorist act.
Sydney, Australia. Hostages seen on camera running for their lives.
5 people escaping from a gunman who some 15 hours ago stormed into a cafe in downtown Sydney waving a jihadi flag.
Underway right now in Paris for the masked gunmen, 3 of them, who stormed a French newspaper, killing at least 12 people at the offices of Charlie Hebdo.
This vicious terrorist attack is a reminder that we must always be vigilant against the enemies of freedom.
Now, the rise of radical Islam around the globe is disturbing, so tonight we have brought together right here in studio terrorism experts, former members and law enforcement officials, and much more to talk about this grave threat. Thank you all for being with us. Appreciate it. Robert Spencer, Jihad Watch. Seems that we have this rise, but there is one commonality in each instance, the word Islam. But yet the president won't say Islamic State. What happened at Fort Hood, Allahu Akbar, is workplace violence. Why this reluctance and resistance to say the word Islam and associate it with terror?
It seems as if the president thinks and the administration thinks that if they say something is Islamic, then they will be at war with the entire Islamic world, and right-wing racist vigilantes will go and victimize innocent people in the United States. Both are hogwash and nonsense, and what's happened is that we have effectively gotten ourselves into a position where it's forbidden to speak about the motives and goals of the enemy, and you cannot possibly defeat an enemy that you refuse to understand.
You know, I had Anjem Chowdhury on, the radical imam. What did he say? I said, well, is Islam a peaceful religion? He said, no, it's not. It's about submission. Is that the interpretation? And how many people are we talking about?
Well, the word Islam itself means submission. It does not mean peace. It's related to peace. But it means submission. And it not only means submission to God, it means submission of the non-Muslims to the Muslims. It is a political system that mandates that the non-Muslims have to live in a state of subordination under the rule of Islam and are denied basic rights.
That is exactly what the imam said to me this week. Very open and honest, and I wanted people to hear that. I came under some fire for putting him on and giving him airtime. Bill Donahue, you're with the Catholic League. We keep hearing, well, they're extremists in every religion. You dealt with the issue of the Virgin Mary painting with elephant dung and a crucifix submerged in urine. Did any Christians go out there and kill because of those expressions?
No, that's because we exercise the virtue of restraint, which obviously is not widespread in the Muslim community. And it's not just the radical Muslims. It may be only a few that are violent. But quite frankly, the support for blasphemy laws in Sharia extends way beyond just these barbarians that we're talking about.
Yeah. Lieutenant General McInerney, let me ask you, do you think militarily the United States is handling this properly? Are we taking Islam, radical Islam, seriously enough that we'll defeat it, or are we appeasing it? Did the French appease the Muslims that moved by giving them their no-go zones, their own private neighborhood and territory? Was that the right decision?
Well, I would say we are not even appeasing it right now. Right now we are losing. We haven't lost, but we are losing, and that's because our military leaders do not know the enemy. As Sun Tzu says, know thy threat. Well, you're going to hear senior military leaders on active duty now, they talk about radical extremists. Sean, tell me, what is the ideology of a radical extremist? I'll tell you what the ideology of a radical Islamist is. It's the Quran, it's Sharia, and it's the Hadith. That's where they get their rules of engagement and their ideology. And so if we don't identify the radicals for what they are and where it came from, we cannot defeat it. And the military today is not identifying it.
Let's talk about, Brigitte, you lived in Pakistan, right?
I lived in Lebanon.
Lebanon, okay. And you understand, you studied the Quran. Let's take the literal interpretation of the Quran. Infidels, jihad, the things that are in there. If taken literally, does that lead to what Robert Spencer's talking about?
Yes, that's exactly what they lead to, jihad against the infidels. We have a saying in Arabic, أولاً يأتي السبت وبعده الأحد. First comes Saturday, then comes Sunday. First we kill the Jews, then we come for the Christians. In the the Islamic Middle East, there is no tolerance to any other faith or group of people. We minorities in the Middle East have been massacred, killed. My house was bombed. This is how I ended up in this country, as a refugee from the Middle East. It was happening when my parents were refugees, when I was a child, newborn, and here I am in America today, and my people are still fleeing because of the intolerance of Islamic extremism. So my past is America's future unless America wakes up now and takes the necessary steps to protect itself.
What are the necessary steps?
Identify the enemy by name in order for you to devise a strategy to defeat it. Right now, we have a president at the White House who doesn't have the moral clarity and the courage to stand up and say what we are fighting. And we need to do that in order for us to defeat this enemy. It is Islamic terrorism. It's not Buddhist terrorism. It's not Jewish terrorism. It's not Catholic terrorism.
How many numbers are we talking about? The world has 1.6 billion Muslims. How many Muslims are we talking about?
We're talking about 1.2 billion Muslims in the world today. 15 to 25% are radicalized.
You're talking about 400 million, maybe?
We're talking about 300 million people who are ready to strap bombs on their bodies and blow us all up to smithereen.
And what about the others? Are they in a silent agreement, or are they afraid that they will be deemed apostates, and apostasism under Islam is death?
The majority agree with the radicals. The Pew Research did a study back in 2013, just almost a year ago, where they interviewed Muslims from around the world: Indonesia, Bangladesh, Nairobi, Pakistan, all over the Islamic world, Egypt. And what they found out is the top 5 Islamic countries: Indonesia, Nairobi, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Egypt. The average 77% support the establishment of Sharia law as the law of the state and the establishment of an Islamic caliphate.
All right, so now we've got 44 million, Benjamin, Muslims in Europe, 44 million. It's expected to grow to 58 million in the next 15 years. Now, we see how France has a problem, Belgium has a problem, all throughout Europe, Great Britain has a problem. They set up no-go zones, non-Muslims not allowed, separate Sharia courts, police can't even go in if there's an issue, or firemen can't go in. So now the question is, okay, if you're a Western country and Sharia is contradictory to all of those values, so Muslims are moving in, how do you determine which Muslims want freedom and which maybe perhaps want to come in and implement Sharia law? How do these Western countries decide who gets in and who doesn't get in?
Well, so I think that there's a social contract that has to exist, right, between the immigrant and the country that they're coming to. I think we certainly believe that here in the U.S.
Right.
I think one of the issues that we've now seen the consequence of in France, as you said, France is the largest Muslim population in Europe, 6.5 million. You know, that's 10% of their population. That has led to them becoming a very large active constituency, right? So President Hollande won 93% of that vote. Of that 6.5 million. That's a very important voting bloc. So they now have gone from these very disparate kind of organizations.
They have voting power.
They have voting power, which means that they have massive amounts of influence, which means how much.
Interesting. So they literally go to France. They don't assimilate. They take portions of the country unto themselves and say, "Don't come into our part."
Yes, sir.
See, Pam, you are very outspoken in terms of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and groups like Hamas and Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, the Muslim Brotherhood. It sounds to me like France has almost set itself up where, like Israel, they will be surrounded very closely by neighbors that want to destroy them. Is this the beginning of something to come?
Well, perhaps they should meet with the French Muslims and set up two states so they can live side by side peacefully. That's a joke.
I could tell.
But look.
But it's not a joke because they are living separately.
No, they are living separately. Police can't go in there. They are ambushed. It's like almost, hundreds of years ago where there were city-states set up. I don't worry so much about the piety and the devoutness of the enemy. I worry about the confusion and the obfuscation on our side. The New York Times actually scrubbed the news story where one of the jihadists told the journalist that lived that she had to convert, she had to study the Quran, and she had to wear the veil.
Yeah.
They took that, they removed that from the story.
The editor took it out of the story. This is very important. We're going to talk about the media later.
Yeah, well, the media.
We'll get to know on this. I know he's a media expert. They took it out of the story.
It's obfuscation. It's deliberate. It's the enemy media. I mean, they're literally deceiving and disarming freedom-loving peoples. Ismail Brinsley, who slaughtered the New York Police Department, his Facebook page, Strike Terror in the Hearts of the Infidel, the beheader, Yisrael, who beheaded Colleen Hufford, who you started out with, his Facebook page was all Islam. That was not in the paper.
How many agree with what Pam's saying? So the world. So let me ask the question another way, maybe more bluntly: is the world cowering to Islam?
Yes.
Hands up.
Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely.
Everybody agrees. Anyone disagree? Anybody disagree? Wow, pretty interesting. All right, we got to take a break. We're going to come back, and coming up next on this busy news night tonight here on Hannity.
As 9/11 in New York, as the subway bombings in London, and now this in Paris, this tells everybody that this can happen anywhere.
Chilling warning from the former deputy director of the CIA. Our audience will weigh in next as we continue this special edition. And welcome back to the special audience edition of Hannity, the rise of radical Islam. So in the wake of the vicious attacks that have plagued Paris, experts are warning that similar terror attacks could be coming here. Take a look.
This is an attack on the way the West lives, and that's different than we've seen before. And I think the response you see in the street around the world is a reflection of that. The other thing I think is, as 9/11 in New York, as the subway bombings in London, and now this in Paris, this tells everybody that this can happen anywhere.
Whether the president wants to recognize it or not, they are at war with us. It is worldwide. We are at risk all over the world, and the president should be leading a worldwide effort against them.
Here with us in studio, we continue with our studio audience. Zainab, I agree with Rudy. I agree that we're not being outspoken enough. I think there's timidity, if you will. Let me ask this question. A lot of the media in the United States, and we'll talk more about this later, decided that they didn't want to show the cartoons that led to the incident in Paris. Is that a mistake?
That's a huge mistake.
Why?
Because this is exactly what the whole notion and concept of freedom of speech is, and the values of liberal, secular democracy is with freedom of speech. And if we're not able to show those cartoons, if we're not able to publicly debate about them and see what it is, it's cowering, it's fear to pull back from them. And we're essentially feeding in to what these Islamists want.
Leah?
At the same time, I have to say that what we're seeing is that the online media, the media that's being used by these terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, are using magazines like Inspire magazine, which I've actually brought a copy of that here with me, and they're using this media to basically say that there's a crusader campaign against Islam. So they're using, this what they're saying is a war on Islam to try to promote violence within their own people.
Yeah. What do you think, David?
Well, there's a broader context to this, and the magazine is part of that, and it was brought up earlier, which is how we see the threat globally. For example, we're talking about 12 attacked in Charlie Hebdo and murdered in a terrorist attack. And, of course, the hostages in the grocery. We're not talking about Boko Haram. We're not talking about Africa. In the last 72-plus hours, if, as reported, some 2,000 people have been killed. In Africa, a continent of some 56 nations, over 30 of them are actually Muslim-controlled or have serious problems. We're looking at an immense continent with resources that can be taken over. And further, our response as a nation, as a globe. This came from my high-level sources in Washington, and this is the first time you'll actually hear this. Secretary of Defense nominee Ash Carter has been told by the White House that he is to stay within the constraints of the Budget Control Act. They should not come up with workarounds around it, as some have done, and that the generals need to be kept in control and not going up to the hill as they did under Secretary Hagel, because they didn't listen to Hagel. So effectively what this White House is doing is they are hamstringing our military. They are disarming our ability to project force. We have an AFRICOM command that's in Germany. We don't have a home for it in Africa. Folks, look around the globe. Look at Malaysia. Look at the Philippines. When you circle the globe and you look at this, this becomes a problem that is global, and we need to pay attention to the success of radical Islam.
Let me go to Ainsley Earhart. The media, you work in the media, you've been a journalist for all these years, and yet they've got to make a decision.
You have to report the facts. You have to stay true to the story. And you have the editor who is willing to die for his cause. The government was telling him not to produce these cartoons and continue on. He chose to do so. And you remember what he said. We talked about it last night on your show. He said, I would rather die standing than, I would rather live standing than die on my knees.
And you know, this was a place that was firebombed. They knew that they were under threat.
I quoted that wrong. I would rather die standing.
No, you had it, right.
Sorry, I had it right. Than live on my knees. Exactly.
Right. But you think about it, these guys were courageous, and I know, you know, Mr. Donahue, we've been friends a long time. I know you don't like it because they also had cartoons about the Pope, and I don't like it. I'm a Catholic like you, but I side with free speech first. Why would we want to stop them from printing that, as repugnant as you and I may find them?
Right. Who said that they wanted to stop them?
No, I'm saying...
No, I said what I'm saying, first of all, let's get it right, Sean.
Okay.
We're not talking here about inoffensive depictions such as the Danish cartoons. We're talking about toilet speech. We're talking about anal sex. We're talking about scatological commentary. We're talking about the kinds of things which I don't think we should put on TV, although I do agree that the Danish cartoons we should put on there just because the Muslims don't like it. Who cares? But I think when it comes to a level of indecency, and if we can't agree that you show people having oral sex and the Pope and I don't care if it's Muslims, Jews, it doesn't make any difference to me, then we ourselves are making a statement that Western values are becoming morally destitute. That's what I object to.
But who gets to determine what gets to be printed and what doesn't get to be printed?
It's an easy decision. It's made every single day. It's made on your show right now. I can prove it to you, but I won't.
Show, but
I could use the F word and it would be deleted because of censorship here at Fox, and I agree with that censorship. I'm asking
we only use that for Bob Beckel. Bob Beckel has a special button.
That's not why they were slaughtered. That's not why they were slaughtered. It was not for pornography. They were slaughtered not because they were slaughtered because they were smart, Alex. They were slaughtered because they ran the cartoons. And Charles, they are war heroes. That was an act of war. That was a military strike in the heart of Paris. It's not just these three guys. Who trained them?
See, I agree with you.
Who's their imam? What mosque did they pray at? I mean, this is there's a whole network. It's not just these three guys.
Bill, I guess this comes down to, either you believe in full and complete freedom of speech.
Nobody does. Nobody does.
Okay, you can't yell fire in a burning building. I got it.
Yes, you can, and I hope you do yell fire in a building that's burning. You cannot yell fire falsely. Now, look, there are about 25 at least exceptions to freedom of speech, okay? Obscenity. You can't infringe on somebody's copyright. Libel, slander. Look, this idea that freedom of speech is an absolute is exactly the problem. You have to be able to have some restraint. That's not accepted by the courts, by the way.
I'll tell you what, we're going to pick it up here, and we'll come back with Bill Maher's comments. I rarely agree with Bill Maher, but I actually thought he made some pretty powerful comments on Jimmy Kimmel. We'll come back. And liberals are in denial about radical Islam. By the way, where have they been for years? We're going to examine the deadly consequences that could have. This and much more on the special audience edition of Hannity, Rise of Radical Islam, straight ahead.
I know most Muslim people would not have carried out an attack like this. True. But here's the important point. Hundreds of millions of them support an attack like this. They applaud an attack like this. What they say is, oh, we don't approve of violence, but you know what? When you make fun of the prophet, all bets are off.
That was Bill Maher and Jimmy Kimmel, a man I rarely agree with. We bring back our studio audience. All right, Bill, I'm going to go right back to you. He is saying something about the left in America. Here you have, let's see, the people on the left in America, they're upset that Mitt Romney has binders of women with their resumes because he wants to hire them. Or that conservatives war on women because conservatives, they don't want to pay for Sandra Fluck's birth control. But women under Sharia, let's see, they have to cover themselves. They can't go out in public without men that they are related to. Some women can't drive. Some women can't go to school or can't go to work. And then, of course, women need 4 male eyewitnesses to prove rape, etc. So isn't it better that we have the freedom of speech that he's talking about and the left starts speaking out about radical Islam?
I want freedom of speech, but I don't want, and neither do the courts, by the way. No speech can be absolute. Otherwise, then you have to get rid of all the laws that I talked about before. Look, liberty is an important value, but it also runs up against justice and equality. That's why one can't trump the other constantly. You've got to have some moderation. Now, this man's a phony. He contributes to the hate speech in this country against Catholics in particular. I have nothing but contempt for him. He's the enemy of freedom because he's the kind of person who people then cry out and say, let's get some censorship. I don't want the government to censor anything. I want people to censor themselves.
Okay, fair enough. And if they don't, you can speak out against it, but you don't. But if you don't like a cartoon, Bill Donahue's not going to go in or...
I've had demonstrations in the street. I'm the one who led the demonstrations on Corpus Christi, the Brooklyn Museum of Art, without violence.
We have free speech here in America, and I would say France does too, but we have to be willing to accept the consequences of speaking out because people will commit crimes. Now, on that, we need to be able, in America here, I think we should start criminalizing any verbal support for ISIS or for support for terrorism or anything like that, because right now they're just spewing it on Facebook and Twitter that they, I support ISIS, I support this, and we don't do anything about it. She was saying that there's over 300 million.
I think our intelligence needs to go after and interview every single person that would write such a thing. I don't think we do enough of that. That's a good point. Often after a shooting or after an incident, we go, oh, here's their Facebook account.
And they post their address because they're out getting a latte while they do it. So why don't we hammer them there?
Oh, that's a good point.
If there's 300 million radicals out there, then why aren't they on the no-fly list? We have 47,000. There are 300 million out there?
It's a great point.
Who are these people?
We're going to get to, I promise we're coming.
Let me tell you something, Sean. We can talk all about these freedom of speech. Let's cut to the chase. America has to wake up. What happened over in Paris is coming here. You got a president that's cutting the defense budget down into the 50 billions. You got Dianne Feinstein there worrying about the people's rights, about waterboarding and about interrogation. I tell you what, when they come here, when they go to Grand Central, Penn Station, and they machine gun some Americans, you're going to see how fast this country is going to change. But we shouldn't wait. We should get the technology. Let me please finish. You got a technology. You got them, like he just said, they're killing thousands of people all over the world. But these 12 people hit the jackpot. It's news all over the world. You think they're not coming to England? There's word already about them attacking transportation, and they're going to come to New York, and everyone's going to say, because I remember 9/11. I was there, and I tell you what, my heart comes out for those families, and it's coming back here. Everyone forgets. And when you get a Dianne Feinstein like that, who's worrying about people's rights with eavesdropping, without the eavesdropping, without intelligence, we're not going to stop the next attack.
Let me go to Lisa. Why is there this silence among the left? How women are treated, gays and lesbians are executed. They're more angry at conservatives not wanting to buy birth control.
Because it's first a political issue and then a human one. I cover this day in and day out. And the headlines, there's one common thread. It's this ideology. And we can connect it to Yemen. That's where the headquarters are in this case with what happened in Paris. But ideology travels, and it travels fast. They know how to use the internet. They know how to use social media. And until we take the phrases of lone wolf and homegrown terrorism out of our lexicon, we will never acknowledge this threat. These two boys, these two young men, were Parisian. They were born and raised in Paris. They chose to seek out this radicalization. They went to Yemen not only to be trained, but to meet with the leaders of these groups. So this is not something that is just, isolated to
They spoke perfect French.
They spoke perfect French. And you know what? Al-Awlaki, the man who he adored and was his mentor, he spoke perfect English.
Yeah.
And he was the expert at targeting these attacks against the West. So they are very much far ahead of us. They are winning. They know how to train the people well. They know how to speak English. They know how to use rap videos. They know how to use social media. And we still have not learned to acknowledge what it is.
So in other words, they're fighting a war.
And you know what? We're treating them as individuals, but they're a military, and they operate as one. And until we fight them as though they're a military, like a country just attacked Paris, a country attacked France.
They're going to say 2 men held off 80,000 army troops and cops in France there. They're going to be martyrs right now, and I guarantee you there's videotape they took on their cell phones, and you're going to see it, and they're going to be martyrs taking on 80,000 troops and cops in France. 2 guys, because they died for Allah.
All right, we got to, I promise, yeah, go ahead, Leah.
It's important to note from the intelligence community that when we talk about homegrown violent and extremists, that's the term that's used by the FBI director, by the National Counterterrorism Director, and that term is used because it's intended to highlight that when you have someone who's being radicalized in their basement, someone who's watching things on social media, it's very hard to detect them. And the reason is because intelligence can use, things like tracking people's connectivity on the internet. They know when somebody's about to make an attack, typically because all of a sudden they see a rapid increase in that connectivity, right? But the point about homegrown violent extremism, in this particular case, it doesn't appear to be the case. These are people who had connections. Right. When we talk about homegrown violent terrorists, violent extremists, they're talking about the person who's radicalized in their basement that is not going to have that connectivity, and it's very difficult from an intelligence perspective to track and predict that. A perfect example of that is the Boston Marathon bomb.
All right, we got to take a break. Stay right there. Coming up. All right, so why does the left continue to deny radical Islam? Why can't they say the word Islam? We're going to answer that question as the special audience edition of Hannity continues straight ahead. And welcome back to Hannity. So for years, liberals have been denying the existence of radical Islam. Watch this tape.
We want to jump out and say Islam has a problem with tolerance. It doesn't. Societies have a problem with tolerance, and we're not teaching these young individuals to be tolerant.
You don't think Islam has a problem with tolerance?
I don't. Absolutely not.
One of the reports has it that one of these guys who led this attack was radicalized by reading about Abu Ghraib, that prior to that he was not an extremist.
I stopped calling these people Muslim terrorists. They're about as Muslim as I am. I mean, they have no respect for anybody else's life. That's not what the Quran says.
Just condemn Islam?
The solution,
no, the solution is very much what
we've killed more Muslims than they've killed us by an awful lot.
No, unfortunately, it gets worse. President Obama, Hillary Clinton have also showed strong leadership. They have not been showing strong leadership when it comes to radical Islamists. Take a look.
The future must not belong to those who slander the Prophet of Islam. But to be credible, those who condemn that slander must also condemn the hate we see in the images of Jesus Christ that are desecrated.
This is what we call smart power, using every possible tool and partner to advance peace and security, leaving no one on the sidelines, showing respect even for one's enemies, trying to understand and, insofar as psychologically possible, empathize with their perspective and point of view.
All right, we bring back our studio audience. Jonathan Gillum. You know, it's interesting to me that I would think that the President of the United States of America and the Secretary of State would have better things to do than blame a YouTube video that they didn't like. Oh, we condemn this. Or Jay Carney and Jacques Chirac that condemned this very news magazine for publishing similar photos back in, what was it, 2012 or 2011. Don't you think they ought to be saying, you know what, if you don't like it, too bad. We believe in free speech.
He's just another example of an incompetent leader. I mean, that's plain and simple. And as the American public have to take charge of this themselves. You know, we have all these people who protest and they say they learned this because they read this or they read that. If they want to start reading something, go and look at history. Look at the way Islam started. Look at the tactics they used. Look at the genocide of the Armenians in the early 1900s. Half of all Armenians are no longer on this planet because of them.
So this is the new caliphate.
This is the new caliphate. And also go back, and we've talked about this before, Dr. Milgram, Stanley Milgram, did a study in 1969 at Harvard University to try to find out why the German population would follow a madman like Hitler. Go and look at that study and then compare and contrast it to today. We're saying 25%. That's of active people that are going to be active. The people who will support those people is upwards of 80 to 90% of the entire population.
Noah, let me bring you in here. Chowdhury saying Islam means submission, the rise of anti-Semitism, some of the rhetoric that I hear, a lot of the terror attacks, reminds me a lot of 1938. I must think I'm off base.
No, I think that's perfectly fair. And what we've seen is a profound bit of hypocrisy from some of the editors, for example, who've been censoring these images while cloaking themselves in the Je suis Charlie movement. And I think we've actually seen a little bit more of what we're seeing on MSNBC on those clips you played, and a little bit on this panel here of conflating incitement to violence, providing material support for terrorists, with supporting tasteless art.
Aren't a lot of us in this room, though, unique in terms of pretty much everybody here is willing to speak the truth and probably, you know, have gotten noticed. I know people in this room have been openly, they have gotten death threats published because of what they say about the treatment of women and radical Islam.
On a slightly less serious level, there's been no bloodshed. But for somebody who spent a career in radio like you have, you know quite well that a group with a letterhead will come after your career for saying something you don't like. And there's a lot of people who have lost their jobs as a result of that. And I wonder how much the individuals who are out there saying Je suis Charlie are going to forget all about that the next time somebody says something offensive and they want their head, figuratively speaking.
Brian?
Right. This isn't about the cartoons, per se. This is about Sharia's blasphemy laws. The victory for the enemy wasn't the attack in Paris. It was our reaction to it when we engage in self-censorship. It's because they can't conquer us and implement Sharia from the top down. So they're trying to intimidate us so that we implement Sharia upon ourselves. So when we self-censor, we are vindicating their ideology.
But the President of the United States is urging self-censorship. The President of the United States' spokesman urged that newspaper not to publish cartoons.
And that gets interpreted as vindication for that ideology. And I guarantee you that groups like Al-Qaeda right now are going to radicalize people by saying, well, we all agree that these type of cartoons should be banned. We showed you how to do it. Allah is blessing us because it worked. So that proves that we are right.
And Andy, and the President, and
This is what was supposed to be blasphemy. Now, we didn't see Orthodox Jews showing up with Kalashnikovs at the Hebdo headquarters. These attitudes are widespread. Brigitte mentioned support for the Sharia. More specifically, in terms of the code of law across the Middle East and North Africa, Pew showed that 80% of these countries still enforce Sharia-based blasphemy law. In the United States, it's getting ominous here too, Sean. There, 58% of U.S. Muslims polled in 2012, around the time of the election, said that they did not abide First Amendment protections for what they called criticism of Muhammad. 46% said they wanted legal punishment. 12% admitted that they would abide the death penalty for those in the United States who, quote, blasphemed Muhammad.
Let me ask this question. How many of you in this room, based on something that you've said about Islam, have gotten some type of threat? Raise your hands. All right, my hand has to go up too. Ainsley, you're innocent. All right, she's the reporter. So, what? Yeah.
We're ignoring some realities, and it comes from the White House on down. Give you an example. November 2014, UAE declares CARE a terrorist organization. Same organization that was unindicted co-conspirators in the Holy Land Foundation trial. But yet CARE has very close ties to this White House. It's not new. Organizations, groups, terrorist groups included, Muslim Brotherhood, they seek influence in government. So we've got to root out this influence within our own government in all sectors. It's not Republican or Democrat. It's within government.
All right, hang on there. We're going to take a break. We'll come back and we'll continue. Much more coming up straight ahead right here on Hannity.
Islam does not mean peace, Sean. It means submission. Submission to the commands of God.
Okay, so you want
if you want to live peacefully with me, then we can live peacefully together.
That was part of my exclusive interview with that radical imam, Anjem Chowdhury. So why everybody needs to take a listen to what he's saying very seriously. We'll explain that and examine that coming up next. Welcome back to the special audience edition of Hannity, The Rise of Radical Islam. Now, last week, the radical London imam, Anjem Chowdhury, was a guest on this program. He gave his definition of what Islam is. Take a close listen.
Islam does not mean peace, Sean. It means submission. Submission to the commands of God.
Okay, so you want
if you want to live
worldwide
peacefully
submission
with me, then we can live peacefully together.
Now, unlike Chowdhury, many Muslims describe theirs as a religion of peace, but some verses from the Quran tell a very different story. Let's take a look at the Quran. Quote, "So when you meet those who disbelieve in battle, strike their necks until you have inflicted slaughter upon them." Here's another. "But those who disbelieve will have cut out for them garments on fire. Pour upon their heads will be scalding water, which is melted, that within their bellies and their skins." And here's what the Quran says about other religions. The Jews say that Ezra is the son of Allah, and the Christians say the Messiah is the son of Allah. Well, that is their statement from their mouths, and it goes on to read, "May Allah destroy them. How are they deluded?" But there are moderate voices in Islam. For example, here is Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi speaking to imams and religious scholars. Listen closely to what he said this past Christmas.
بتوقف كثيرا قدام الحالة اللي احنا موجودين فيها. مش معقول يكون الفكر اللي احنا بنقدسه ده يدفع بالأمة دي بالكامل ان هي تبقى مصدر للقلق وللخطر والقتل والتدمير في الدنيا كلها. يعني 1.6 مليار هيقتلوا الدنيا كلها اللي فيها 7 مليار عشان يعيشوا هم؟ مش ممكن. انا بقول تاني احنا محتاجين ثورة دينية.
And we bring back our studio audience. Robert, that's where we started. The Quran. Brigitte, that's where we started. So is that how you're saying 300 million Muslims interpret the Quran that literally?
Estimated 300 million Muslims out of the 1.2 billion who follow the teachings of the Quran and believe it literally to the word, and they want to follow it.
How many people agree that that is the interpretation of as many as 300 million or more?
It's many more than that, Sean. It's many more than that. It's
I've
not
had
just
500 million. I thought it was 1.6 billion.
Well, 300 million may be willing to actually go out and kill. But the literalism is the mainstream understanding of the Quran in Islam. There is no developed tradition of interpreting these things in some figurative way. When the Quran says fight against the people of the book, that's Jews and Christians, until they pay the jizya, a tax, with willing submission and feel themselves subdued, that is taught as a mandate for warfare by the vast majority, by virtually all Islamic authorities. It's mainstream. The Muslims who are not fighting still understand that that is something that is good and proper to be done, and they applaud those who do it.
General, I understand the military knows this, but I only think it's beginning to dawn on people. Everyone here in this room has read the Quran, or at least portions of it. And what? Yeah, and I would assume the military knows full well what's in there. But do you think the average American does?
Well, first of all, the average American doesn't, but the average military man doesn't either. They have restricted the study of radical Islam. They don't even use that term. Anything in their curriculum that talks about radical Islam has been eradicated with this administration. And that is our main problem. And in our leadership, look, the captains, the majors, the sergeants understand that the Iraqis, et cetera, did not want our Jeffersonian democracy. They wanted our money. But
President Obama scrubbed all of the materials that General McInerney is talking about. Robert Spencer used to talk to Intel. They're not getting any education whatsoever. What General Sisi said was calling for a revolution it's calling for a revolution in Islam. That you
he
imagine,
may die for those comments.
Saying
you've got to change.
Your President Obama did not
back
my
him. President.
He backed the Muslim Brotherhood. He backed the opposition to this man that's speaking frankly and candidly about Islam.
Well, Sean, this brings a bigger issue. Is the issue Islam as a whole for failing to police itself? we need to look at that as a country.
David.
There's a very important point to come off what Carl just said. We can fight this problem. We can kill terrorists, and we should kill as many as possible at every opportunity. But it's up to the Muslims around the world to police and solve their problem. And frankly, this will be a violent solution. Muslims will have to kill Muslims by the tens of thousands, by the millions to solve this issue.
No.
Yeah, I think what the general was talking about is really a failure of our understanding geopolitically. In 2001, it was unfathomable that you could see the establishment of a caliphate across North Africa and into the Middle East. Today, it is a reality. We're looking at a geopolitical, a real war, not an counterinsurgency operation like we saw in the last decade.
Let me go to, hang on, Leah, Andy, yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say that I actually went with Robert to Fort Leavenworth at one point, and the same academic resistance that you see towards understanding and teaching the jihad ideology that you would see in the Ivy League at a Harvard, for example, where you would understand it because it's a hard left institution. That is in the military institutions as well.
Leah, you were fighter pilot?
I'm just going to have to correct the record here about the military and the intelligence community because I served in both. And to say that there's not an understanding of violent extremism and terrorism in those communities is absolutely wrong.
It's jihad. It's not violent extremism. It's jihad. Okay, it's rooted in Islam. It is how the Muslim Empire was created. It's how it's how
you can play tit for tat here, but to say that the intelligence community does not understand it, is not focused on it, is absolutely wrong. If you listen to the testimony, of the director of the National Counterterrorism Center and the director of the FBI, these are things that they are looking at, they're things they're watching, and it's things the intelligence community have been watching for. The counterinsurgency manual is completely separate from the intelligence community. I'm sorry,
but we're going to have to. This was such a peaceful show.
Muslim organizations wrote to John Brennan on October 19th, 2011, demanding that all mention of Islam be removed from
We got to take a break.
terrorism.
We'll come back in just a moment. More Hannity straight ahead. All right, that is all the time we have left this evening. I want to thank our very special studio audience. Give yourselves a big hand. Thank you for being with us on this very important topic. And as always, thank you for being with us, and we'll see you back here soon.